Hello, thank you for joining us on the news. I'm Ruth Aguele. My sign language interpreter is Shagun Ajayi. Let's start with the headlines. Court gives Nnamdi Kanu last chance to open his defense on his terrorism trial. Nigeria secures hosting right of first UNESCO Category 2 International Media and Information Literacy Institute. National Emergency Management Agency collaborates with National Assembly to build resilience to tackle disasters. The federal government says the task of keeping Nigeria safe for every citizen is non-negotiable, owing to its untiring commitment to faithfully guarantee peace and stability across every corner of the country. Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, who was speaking during a World Press Conference on Nigeria's designation as country of particular concern by the U.S. President Donald Trump. Correspondent Abubakar Akwanga reports.
Nigeria has said it will welcome assistance from the United States in fighting armed groups as long as its territorial integrity is respected. Officials and experts in Nigeria refuted Trump's claims of mass killings of Christians, noting that Boko Haram and Al-Qaeda-linked groups target people of all faiths.
Nigeria and the United States are two giants on the global stage that share common economic, political and social influence spanning many decades with growing partnership in energy and defense. Today, these narratives are threatened following the designation of Nigeria as a nation of particular concern by the U.S. President Donald Trump on the alleged persecution of Christians. Now, the federal government said the claims are untrue and do not reflect on the security reality on ground, as the government is committed to securing every part of the country.
In the last 2 years, significant progress, to give you an example, has been made in the war against terrorism across the Northwest, Northeast, Southeast, North Central, and other parts of this country. Within this period, the number of terrorism-related attacks has plummeted. In March, a report, and I want you to listen to this, in March this year, a report by the Global Terrorism Index indicated that terrorist attacks were at their lowest in over a decade in Nigeria. The Nigerian government did not say this. It is also the international community represented by the Global Terrorism Index that has given out this information.
The minister explained that several arrests of bandits, terrorist kingpins, sponsors and informants are being made on a daily basis, with the rescue of tens and hundreds of victims from their enclaves.
Less than 2 months ago, two internationally acclaimed terrorism suspects, Muhammad Usman and one Abubakar Abba, who are wanted not just by Nigeria, they are wanted by the international community, including the United States, are currently undergoing prosecution after their arrest by a great coordination by our security agencies and the armed forces. The two are believed to be the leaders of Jama'atu Ansar Muslimina fi Bidali Sudan, commonly known as Ansaru. It is Nigeria's Al-Qaeda affiliate. They were captured, like I said, in a high-risk, intelligence-led counter-terrorism operation only a few months ago, and this has been welcomed by the international community.
Mohammed Idris said the federal government procured sophisticated military hardware, including Super Tucano from the U.S., to contain the situation in troubled spots across the 6 geopolitical zones.
Nigeria welcomes dialogue, welcomes cooperation, we also welcome support from foreign nations, including the United States of America, in addressing our shared security concerns. We warmly invite all our partners, both domestic and international, to join us in this noble endeavor, anchored on trust, on collaboration, and also based on mutual respect.
The minister assured that the federal government will explore all diplomatic channels to remedy the wrong impression and continue to promote fundamental human rights, dignity to life, and freedom of speech, which are universally recognized tenets of democracy. In Abuja, Abubakar Akwanga, NTA News.
Federal government has reached out to the international community, calling for support in its current drive to ensure stability and ongoing reform agenda, while issuing a firm reminder to respect the nation's sovereignty. Represented the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry, Umar Ahmed Dunoma, made the appeal while briefing diplomats stationed in their various missions in Abuja. Garba Nata'Allah reports.
On arrival, diplomats were warmly received by officials of Foreign Affairs Ministry. As the Permanent Secretary takes his seat, silence and attention tilt towards his address, updating the diplomatic corps on Nigeria's economic reforms and their impact on all Nigerians.
Under this administration, the government is taking decisive actions to stabilize the macroeconomic environment, expand social investments, and improve national security. The government remains focused on national prosperity and economic resilience, continuing to implement far-reaching and beneficial reforms that are beginning to yield the desired results.
On security, the Permanent Secretary outlines Nigeria's stance, which is committed to protecting its citizens and strengthening global partnerships built on truth and mutual respect.
Nigeria has consistently demonstrated its openness to dialogue and cooperation and constructive engagement, which should remain the standard in the engagement between and among sovereign states in the international system.
The silence, perhaps, has made a difference. And one question remains hanging in the balance. How will these diplomats respond and advise their governments? Well, so far the move is now left in their court. The briefing is meant to correct any statement or rhetorics that dominated news headlines recently. In Abuja, Garba Muhammad Nata'Allah, NTA News.
Nigeria has secured the hosting right of the first UNESCO Category 2 International Media and Information Literacy Institute. The Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, who was represented at the 43rd UNESCO General Conference in Samarkand, Uzbekistan, assured the global community that Nigeria will maintain its leading role, sanitizing the media ecosystem and ensure that the world communicate, build bridges and not barriers. Salihu Abdullahi Gwanara reports.
That the decision
Oga, please reduce this
on
font.
this item
They're too big.
Be taken without debate.
The diplomatic struggle that started in 2022 on the hosting right of the UNESCO Category 2 Institute has ended here.
It is proposed that we approve the designation of International Media and Information Literacy Institute in Abuja as an institute under the auspices of UNESCO Category 2, as recommended by the Executive Board in 222X Decision 19.9. Are there any comments? I see no comments, objections, so we approve this paragraph.
Through UNESCO, the world has shown resilience and unity to manage the evolving dangers of fake news. In order to walk the talk, the global organization has considered and approved the resolution of the 216th session of the Executive Board held in May 2023 after Nigeria has pledged to host the UNESCO Category 2 Institute.
We are all besieged by torrents of information where lines between fact and fiction are often deliberately blurred by misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech. These challenges respect no borders and threaten the very foundations of our democracies and social cohesion. The International Media and Information Literacy Institute has therefore been designed to serve as an international observatory for media and information literacy, a hub for research, policy dialogue, and capacity building.
Most importantly, what do we do? The next step. How are we going to judiciously guide, protect, and maintain this institute, not just for the benefit of Nigeria, but also the worldwide, because this is an international institute, the first of its kind to be established. I remember the first time we submitted the bill, we had problem with some of our fellow African countries. I don't want to mention names. It was like a fight. But you know, Nigeria is strong. Nigeria is resilient.
And for the UNESCO to have this kind of confidence to locate this institution in Nigeria is a step forward in at least presenting Nigeria in good light.
Our own side will try as much as possible. I will give the process a legislative backing to ensure that everything that needed to be done, done with the light of speed.
And we're going to engage Nigerians to work in the institute. Number two, international community will be flying into Nigeria. Members of the international will be flying into Nigeria. They'll be hosted in Nigeria. They will buy our food. They will stay in our hotels to learn, to study, to be certified by this institute. What can be better than this for us?
The stage is set for the launch of the institute in Abuja in February 2026. The 3-year battle has come to an end, and this means Nigeria now has more teeth, not only to bite, but to chew and solve the menace of fake news, misinformation, and disinformation. From Samarkand in Uzbekistan, Salihu Abdullahi Gwanara, NTA News.
In other news, the Economic Community of West African States has urged the United Nations and international partners to bolster support for member states battling escalating terrorist violence across the region, including Nigeria. In a communique, ECOWAS highlighted attacks by armed groups that indiscriminately target civilians regardless of religion, gender, ethnicity or age. It said that terrorist-related violence does not discriminate, citing years of independent reports. The regional body explicitly rejected what it called false and dangerous claims, suggesting that terrorist groups target specific religious communities or that a genocide is underway against any single faith group. Such narratives, ECOWAS warned, risk inflaming tensions and undermining social cohesion. ECOWAS called on the whole world to stand by the countries in the region in their fight against terrorism that targets all communities. China's premier vowed to further open up domestic markets and slammed unilateral and protectionist behavior by other countries, as Beijing positions itself as an attractive destination for global firms spurned by U.S. tariffs. Framapai reports.
The Asian export giant has courted alternative trade partners throughout months of blistering tit-for-tat tariffs between China and the United States. Looking at a certain unilateral and protectionist actions in the international arena today, we see they severely disrupt the international economic and trade order, Premier Lin Kuang said at the opening of a major import-expo in Shanghai. He said many multinational corporations feel that doing business is now increasingly difficult and that developing nations were especially vulnerable to economic turbulence. Days earlier, U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping sealed the trade war pause at a meeting in South Korea, tentatively concluding months of friction between the economic and technological powerhouses. Li said China was ready to work with other countries to safeguard the stability and smooth operation of global industrial and supply chains. Meanwhile, the European Union announced that launch of an in-depth probe into mining giant Anglo-American's plan to sell its nickel business to the Chinese-controlled MMG Group. The $500 billion deal announced in February will see 2 ferronickel producing sites in Brazil and 2 additional projects in the country be taken over by MMG, whose largest shareholder is a Chinese state-owned company. In a statement, the European Commission said the deal could allow MMG to restrict the supply of ferronickel, a key alloy used in stainless steel production, to European steelmakers, potentially driving up their manufacturing cost. MMG has already submitted commitments to address the Commission's concerns, but Brussels deemed them insufficient at this stage. As a result, the EU executive has opted to open a full-scale investigation to be concluded by March 20 next year. Frama Pani, NTA News.
All right, let's take a break. We're back shortly. Stay tuned. Thank you for staying tuned. President Bola Tinubu has requested the House of Representatives to approve a borrowing program of 1,150 billion naira to fund deficits in the 2025 budget. The president's request, read on the floor of the House by the Deputy Speaker Benjamin Kalu, emphasizes the need to increase domestic borrowing limit to bridge the budget shortfall, as well as to enable government to meet its financial obligations and stimulate economic growth.
₦59.99 trillion naira, an increase of 5.25 trillion naira from the 49.74 trillion naira budget proposed by the executive. This increase created a budget deficit of 14.10 trillion naira. However, the proposed borrowing approved in the budget was 12.95 trillion naira. It is therefore necessary to increase the domestic borrowing limit in the 2025 budget by 1,477,462,863,321 naira 39 kobo to close this gap.
On the judiciary scene, as Nigeria consolidates its political gains, members of the National Assembly have been advised against any attempt to shift the burden of proof in election petitions from the petitioners to the Independent National Electoral Commission. A former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Joseph Daudu, SAN, gave the advice in Abuja. Daily Atumbia judiciary correspondent reports.
The Electoral Act enacted in 2022 is currently undergoing another amendment process as a way of strengthening the nation's constitutional democracy. In the subsisting Electoral Act, the burden of proof is on the petitioner in line with the legal principle of whosoever alleges must prove. The proposal for the shift of burden of proof from petitioner to the electoral umpire, Joseph Daudu SAN, says is a dangerous trend. The member of the INABA is of the opinion that the move is capable of compromising the Commission's neutrality. Joseph Daudu SAN asserts that the proposal to make INEC responsible for proving election irregularities contradicts both logic and established legal principles. He is of the view that the Act already provides complete and accessible records of the election process. Shifting that burden to INEC despite these inbuilt mechanisms would permanently damage the avowed neutrality of the Commission. Addressing the issue of exercise of prerogative of mercy, Daudu SAN explained that the power of pardon has existed since colonial era and has been retained in every Nigerian constitution from 1960 to date. He noted that presidents and governors have used this power for reconciliation, reformation of convicts, or humanitarian reasons. In Abuja, Dele Atumbi, NTA News.
Justice James Omotosho of the Federal High Court has given the acclaimed leader of the proscribed leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu, who is charged with terrorism acts, the last chance to open his defense. The judge, who made the passionate appeal for the fourth time, said in the event the defendant failed to enter his defense on the 7th of November 2025, the court will close his case. Judiciary correspondent Austin Ayembe reports.
The defendant, Nnamdi Kanu, when called upon to open his defense Wednesday, maintained his stand that there is no law in the Constitution of Nigeria upon which he is being tried, hence cannot enter his defense. He requested the court to grant his consultants access to him in custody as he wants to file some processes. Justice Omotosho then said the earlier order he gave was for the DSS to allow his counsel access to him on Saturdays and Sundays, but having relieved them such permission to see his consultants is now at the discretion of the DSS. Kanu, who wanted to move the motion filed on Monday, highlighted some points, saying the Supreme Court in its ruling, while ordering him to stand for trial, equally ordered the prosecution to amend the law upon which he's been tried, but that was not done. Justice James Omotosho maintained that issues raised by the defendant have been dealt with in his ruling on no case submission and advised him to be properly guided as he wants justice to be done in the matter. The prosecution counsel Adegboyega Awomolo, senior advocate of Nigeria, urged the court to adopt the statement by the defendant as his written address and proceed to give judgment. But the trial judge said the defendant, not being a lawyer, needs to be given another chance to rethink on the path he has chosen in the interest of justice. He then adjourned the matter to the 7th of November 2025 for the defendant to enter his defense or have his case closed. From the Federal High Court, Austin Anyebe, NT News.
A human rights activist, Moyele Sowore, has narrowly escaped issuance of bench warrant against him by the Federal High Court in Abuja, following his failure to appear before the court for arraignment on defamation. During proceedings, counsel to the Department of the State Service, Akinlolu Kehinde SAN, prayed to the court to issue a bench warrant against Sowore for being absent in court without justification, having been served the charge and hearing notice from the last adjourned date. Akinlolu Kehinde SAN said the action of Sowore staying away from court despite being served with a charge is an affront to the sanctity of the court and must be treated with punishment such behavior deserves. The suspended Deputy Commissioner of Police, Abba Kyari, in continuation of his defense, is to be cross-examined by the prosecution on 12th of November 2025. This was after he concluded giving his evidence this Wednesday in his case of alleged failure to declare his assets. Once again, let's hear from Judiciary correspondent Austin IMB.
Concluding his evidence as the first witness in his defense, Abba Kyari, who was a commander of intelligence rapid team of the Nigerian police force, maintained that he declared all his properties and that of his wife. He said some of the properties listed by the prosecution belonged to his father. The defendant said all the millions of naira seen in his accounts were monies paid into his accounts by the Nigerian police force, also on state governors where they carried out operations. He told the court that within the period he held sway as commander of anti-robbery squad and commander intelligence rapid team of the Nigerian police force, more than 1,000 operations were carried out with monies paid into his account for disbursement. When asked why money paid into his account by the CBN ends up in his relatives' accounts, he said they were used to settle loans he took from them for operations, as it took the Nigerian police force time to release funds due to processes, as such operations require urgent funds. The prosecution sought adjournment to enable him obtain a document to cross-examine the defendant. To this end, the court adjourned the matter to 12th November 2025 for conclusion of the cross-examination of the first witness and continuation of hearing. In Abuja, Austin Anyebe, NT News.
Disaster risk reduction is gaining more attention as stakeholders in line with disaster risk reduction mechanism rally to enhance resilience among communities affected by disasters in Nigeria. Now, the latest collaboration is a legislative retreat by the National Assembly Committee on Disaster Management and the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA. Ilyasu Ali Yakubu reports.
Since the shift from reactive approach to proactive disaster management by the United Nations General Assembly and the focus on building resilience among victims of the disaster, the ugly narratives seem to be changing for good. The National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, is not resting on its oars at ensuring that disasters are managed at the local level before it escalates. This legislative retreat is geared towards providing a platform for NEMA and the legislature to deepen collaboration, review existing frameworks, identify gaps in funding and policy, as well as work together towards a sustainable and forward-looking system for disaster management.
Disaster management by its nature demands constant investment in readiness, not only in relief material, but in systems, people, data, and technology.
Strengthening collaboration between the legislature and implementing agencies such as NEMA is therefore critical to building a truly resilient Nigerian society.
Addressing these challenges requires renewed energy between the legislature, NEMA, and all stakeholders.
The consensus is that the framework for national resilience must rest on legislative commitment through enabling laws, sustained budgetary prioritization, and oversight that ensures that preparedness mechanisms remain functional and effective. In Abuja, Ilyasu Aliyakubu, NTA News.
All right, now a quick check at Thursday's weather just before we go. That concludes the news. Thank you very much for your time. I'm Ruth Aguwele. My sign language interpreter is Shegun Ajayi.